the institution or the person doesn't influence my intimidation or fear at all. It's God himself who guides my actions and my thoughts. Verse 14, then the king, when he heard these words, it says he was sorely displeased with himself. That means he was ashamed. He was ashamed. Interesting enough, it reminds me of those, he was showing what Jesus is bringing out here as the typology of this happening of what happens in the Messianic reign. There's this passage in the book of Hebrews in chapter 6, verse 6. Having fallen away again, it's impossible to renew them unto reformation. They, having re-crucified, are exposing to contempt the Son of God. Exposing to contempt the Son of God. Like when you're in contempt of court, right? That means you're disregarding, dishonoring the judge in their station. So when he's saying he was ashamed, it's talking about, now in this particular practical reality, it's King Cyrus the Great, Darius the Mede, who was ashamed of himself that he got played. Practically speaking, in the reality of the history of it, he's talking about himself. But in typology, he's talking about how Jesus is saying, I hold you in contempt. You're trying to pull a fast one on me. I hold you in contempt. You're trying to act as if that you can play me because I'm not a high priest. That I won't. That you're acting as if I'm not acting as a high priest right now. You can actually do things that can impose upon me what I should and shouldn't do. How dare you? How dare you? And it says he's ashamed. I think it speaks to Jesus showing his disgust toward us, who are made sinless, who are the ones where he says in Matthew 13, he removes all the seducers and iniquitous people, the stumbling blocks and those going against the law out of his kingdom as the tares, right? Well, who seduces them? The 60 fruit offshoot people, those two, the princes, the 30 fruit people who don't have the extra measure of oil. They are the ones who are the seducers. They're the ones who were sinless and knew better. And they got caught in this sin. He's like, you think I don't understand that? I'm ashamed of you. That's what I think he's talking about here. In reality, it's Cyrus the Great being played, and he's ashamed of himself that they played him. Jesus is pointing out in symbolism, these people think they can do this and not get punished for it. You think there's no recourse for what you're doing? He's ashamed. It's a shameful thing for God to have made you sinless, and this is what you've done with it. It's shameful. You should be ashamed of yourself. So then, he says here in verse 14, he was displeased with himself, setting his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And it says he labored till the going down of the sun to rescue him. What does that speak to? He attempted many times to make new decrees, new edicts. And they said, remember, King, you signed that this is the deal for 30 days, and you can't go against that which is signed. You signed the order itself, and you also signed the edict that says you can't change the order, and you know the rules of the Medes and Persians. What does that speak to you about this symbolic aspect of God the Son? Well, during the 1 Corinthians, chapter 15, 24 to 28, it tells you that he has to hand over the kingdom for God the Father to be all in all. There's a part he has to play. He has to stay tuned into that facet of his will that he is fulfilling the prophecies of his kingship. He has to rule from the throne of Father David. He doesn't have the time to go up to heaven as he does go to and fro. He can't hang out there and make everything right from these idiots who are getting involved in sinful nature things on the earth when they're going to and from. He can't, but he's doing everything he can because he is going to and fro. Praise Jacob's ladder. We're doing that, and so is he. He's ruling and reigning both heaven and earth, but he's ruling from earth. He's not going to be up there in heaven and trying to help. No, you're going to get caught away and you're traversing back and forth and tangled up in this sin. He's like, look, I'm going to do everything I can to help you, but unfortunately, there's a certain stopgap here that I'm not here. That's not my role at this point. My role, I can't go beyond my role at this point. And your role at this point supersedes that. Since I have to continue to work, your job was to continue to work with me. And since you're working against me, you're now bearing that on your own. I can do all I can to help you. I set the stage in place to help you. I made your sin go away. I made you aware of going into the Aristotle without headed to Dipnon. I gave you a there of what you're fighting for. I gave you a stacked deck in your favor to be sinless, and yet you're the one who I can't. I'm doing everything I can, but I'm not going to go beyond what I already set in motion as the rules of my messianic reign. And the rules are he focuses on being king to his people Israel and to reign over his kingdom. That's his whole that's his full thing. Right? You said Obama did, you're funny. I know what king would sign the edict, he can never be changed, right? And now he did it, and that's the Medo-Persian rule. And that's why they got him. He signed both the edict of what the rule was, and he also signed the writing, and he also signed the decree that says I can't go against it. He tried to make other decrees to kind of add flavor, to kind of make it so that he could do it, and like, nope, can't do it. So then, and it says he labored, which means he just did many attempts, right? So in verse 15, then these men assembled unto the king, and said unto the king, Know, O king, the law of the Medes and Persians, that no decree nor statute which the king established may be changed or altered. Verse 16, chapter 6. Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel, and cast him into the lion's den, the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, God whom thou serves continuously, perpetually, he will deliver you. Meaning, it's a declaration, you have a precious faith promise, no harm will come to you, which there won't. Verse 17, and one stone was brought and laid before the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and the signet of his lords. So it's sealed, going back to the precious faith promise. Him and his lords, meaning him and his word. So he, Jesus, gave Daniel, as a faithful one, typology here, a promise to him on the basis of his character and his word. That once you're the betrothed bride, never shall you change that status. You will always be the bride and one day revealed as such. That's my character and that's my word. That's why it says his signet and of his lords. Speaking to the word, the character, and the word. His character is him signet, and the lords represents him being accountable to his word. Then, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. Verse 18, and the king went to his palace, and he passed the night, it says, fasting, or that means without a feast. Meaning, this attack against faithful ones during the Messianic kingdom will happen during the Ariston prior to the Deipnon. And that's why he's referencing this typology of the king, Cyrus the Great, Darius the Mede, same guy. He's typifying Jesus, who is going without a marriage feast during the Messianic reign in lieu of and waiting anticipation of procuring his bride when the Deipnon, when he rises up from the household or from his station down here to take his throne up in heaven. Because remember, Jesus has 3 thrones he sits on. Throne of Father David, according to Revelation 3, the Father's throne he sat on, has his own throne. He hasn't sat on that one yet. He will. And that's the one he gets when he gets at that marriage feast, like on heaven. That's why he says here in verse 18, the king went to his palace and passed the night. And again, without a feast, with fasting. Neither were there instruments of music before him, and his sleep was fled from him. Meaning God doesn't rest. There is no rest God has. He's always diligent and vigilant to care for his faithful one, his betrothed bride. There's nothing that will happen to the betrothed bride. Nothing during the Messianic reign. You can try your worst. Those of jealousy and envy, those who are in sin, those who fall into sin. Doesn't matter. Try your worst, what this story is about. Ain't going to happen. What you're not going to do is succeed. What you are going to do is dig your own grave. I wouldn't suggest it. So here, this is 30 days, referencing again that maturity they were lacking. That's why the 30 days, it was a limit. And here, it says here, which probably explains why he probably signed it, thinking it says 30 days. Yeah, but he should have read it, right? Then the king arose, in verse 19, very early in the morning, and went in haste unto the den of lions. Refers to early in the morning, Mary Magdalene ran quickly to the tomb of Jesus, meaning anticipation of the new beginning of the restoration of that which people think is the revealing, the restoration and revealing of Christ as being the resurrected Lord was meant by a very early in the morning Mary Magdalene getting there first, right? So here's this king raised up very early in the morning, reminding people that, hey, what happens to the betrothed bride who's being attacked, who, like Revelation 3, Philadelphia called out one people were being told, hold fast your crown, that no one can take it. Why? this is what's happening, because there's 5 rich people trying to take your crown. They want to take you away from that betrothed bride. They want to take you away, which they can't do. Doesn't mean they're not going to try. They can't win, but they're going to not stop trying. They're still sinful, or they got into sin, and they're being puppeteered by the influence of Satan, by the Paneros level of him. So here it says, and they early in the morning he went and hastened to the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamenting voice. A lamenting voice. Sounds a lot like the end of day 7. And we know, Matthew 25, there's what? At the midnight cry. That's insane. That's crazy. And why is the den of lions in view with this faithful one? Because there's those who are going to be sons of disobedience earmarked by going to this den of lions, this lake of fire. The lions represent those who are overcome by sin. That's their final realized judgment because of that. He had a lamenting voice unto Daniel, and the king spoke and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is your God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver you from, this means out of, the lions. As in out of sin. Lions represent that which is sinful in you that overcomes. Remember, Jesus is the Lion of Judah who took on our sins. Satan is described as a roaring lion who devours us because we give in to our sins. Either way, sin is associated with the lion. Do you see that? The Lion of Judah who takes our sin on, or Satan who poses as a lion who devours us because we give in to our sin. So here when he says, who has delivered you from the lions out of your sin? In other words, did you give in to sin? He's like, nope, no sin overtook me, Jack. Because he was a sinless body in day 7 Messianic reign, he sustains a sinless body, and there's nothing you could do. As 1 Thessalonians 5:23, Paul wants us to be blameless in spirit, soul, and body. Daniel in verse 21, he uttered to the king, O king, live forever. My God has sent what? His angel. Not just an angel, his angel, the personal angel of God. Showing again a special privilege and a precious faith promise. And he has shut the mouths of the lions, meaning he did not allow sin to overcome me. I didn't overcome sin. He allowed sin not to overcome me, being sinless as a typology of those in day 7, millennial reign. But of course, Daniel in real life was sinful. He just means that, again, they didn't overcome him. But typology talked about this sinless state of us in millennial reign. They have not hurt me. They didn't hurt me. For as much as before of them, innocence was found in me. That word is zaku. The word zaku for innocence means purity. Parallels with the aspilos, anakaliktos, noticed of the bride. That's who Daniel's a type of here. Why all these different symmetries that I'm bringing out? I'm just pointing them out. I didn't make them up. I didn't have a lamenting cry. I didn't have 2 names for a king, Cyrus the Great and Darius the Mede, which speaks to Jesus being the Messianic reign, the king for the Jews, but he's also still God of all things, right? There's a day of the Lord and a day of God. He has to fulfill this to all things be fulfilled so God could be all in all. There's 2 dualities of Jesus' role. He's fulfilling his Messianic kingship in view of God being all of all. This is why Cyrus has 2 names, Cyrus the Great and Darius the Mede, the royal one of the Medes. Because his mother was Mede and his father was Persian. Again, this idea that he gets to hear and he says, I'm innocent, I was pure, it was found in me. Really? Purity in you? It can't mean he's sinless, because Daniel in real life is sinful. He even says so in chapter 9. We sinned, we sinned, we sinned. But what's he mean by this? In typology, it speaks to the zaku in Hebrew, speaks to the aspilos anakaliktos of the bride. Was found in me. And before you, O king, I have done no wickedness. I love it. And the word wickedness here is the word no hurt. It's the word kabelel. In other words, I have done nothing to harm you, nothing to dishonor you. Daniel did nothing as a type of the betrothed bride in the Messianic reign who entered, did not inherit, because nobody in the heavens inherits till day 8. But he did nothing to dishonor in his entered state as a betrothed bride, because he can't. He's a precious faith promise. He's pure. He's innocent. He's aspilos, anakaliktos. Of course he's not. But doesn't mean they're not going to die trying. They're going to try to get him to. He said, I didn't do anything to dishonor you, Jesus, basically. No, of course he didn't. Verse 23, Then was the king exceedingly glad for him. Exceedingly glad. Does that sound familiar to you? At the time when Jesus says, enter into the joy of the Lord. The king was exceedingly glad. Exceedingly glad. And commanded and said they should take Daniel up, 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 ascending out, up, not from, not out of, up, up, meaning it was down in a pit, a den of lions, not in some cave or no, it was down, speaking to lake of fire, Hades, Gehenna, lake of fire, and a deep part of that's the abyss, the pit. And it says they brought him up out of the den. So, and Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of harm was found upon him, similar to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Nothing harm came to him. What kind of harm? No lion attack, no scratch, no bite, but also no broken bones. Why do you say that for? Because keep reading, you'll find out. Because he was thrown into a pit, his bones should have broken. You don't throw someone into a pit. That's what the word dungeon means, a cistern or a pit. You don't throw you in there and now your bones get broken. It's going to happen, Jack. He's like, got nothing. Bones are good. I'm good to go. The lion is a symbol. Yeah, so again, a lion is a symbol of a ruler. Symbol of a king. That's why Jesus is the Lion of Judah, the ruler of all mankind, of all things. He's creator. But he's also, as that ruler, he took on our sin. And Satan is the ruler of this world, not the God, a ruler of this world, right? And he comes after us, trying to devour us within our sin. Which is why lion's associated with being a ruler, but also it's associated with sin. Either getting us to be, because think about it, what Jesus said, a godly king will lead you into righteous living. An ungodly king will do what? Lead you into unrighteous living. So the ruler impacts how sin affects you. Right? That's why sin and that ruler are connected. The lion does represent a ruler or a king. But he's talking about that ruler dictates how sin is then impacted and how it connects to that ruler. If you have Jesus as your ruler, he takes away your sin. If you have Satan as your ruler, he's going to devour you in your sin. And that's why the lion represents, how does sin rule over you? Are you overcoming it because of the blood of the Lamb? Or is it overcoming you because you're being led by Satan? Influenced by Satan? Yee. That ain't cool. Don't let sin rule over you, it says, right? So there you go. Absolutely. Absolutely. Jesus is not reigning and ruling right now. Satan is the ruler, and he's I'd say, false king, which is why he comes about the Stephanos, right? On the white horse, right? So yeah, he's a ruler, a prince. I wouldn't say king, I'd say prince. Because he wants to, I don't want to give him the word, you could say king, but I don't like to look at him that way, because I say he's always one step below any accolade he could have. Ruler and prince, I wouldn't say king. Stephanos could lead to saying a king, but even then it's more like a steward, ruler, prince is more appropriate. I don't like saying king, so I don't like the Yahoo. So, and then when we go to verse 23, so no manner of hurt was found upon him because he believed in his God. Verse 24, then the king commanded and said that they brought those mighty men. That's what it means, mighty men. These mighty men means men that were strong. In other words, these men weren't some slouches. These weren't people that didn't know better, basically. They knew better. Which had accused, which means they nitpicked and they chewed out Daniel. They were constantly looking for ways to devour him with some narrative of nitpicky disposition, validation of a narrative type argument. He's like, oh, all y'all come here right now. And he cast them into the den of lions, their children and their wives, which speaks to, just like in Matthew 18, the story of the righteous king, when he said, you owe me so much money, I could have you and your wife and your children enslaved for life. Because you owe me lifetimes. You owe me 3 lifetimes of a debt, which means you can't pay it off in your lifetime, because it's over 3 lifetimes you have to pay it. So I got your wife and kid also, your kids also as recourse. These speak to the fruit yield or the results that you owe God. Either you owe him the results or he takes from you your fruit. You give him the fruit he requires, or he takes what you already have. I think I read that somewhere. From he who has, take from him and give it to those who hasn't, all right? He who has not, take it from him, right? He took from them the children and their wives as a taking of their fruit yield. They get disinherited, and the mastery of them, and broke and pulverized their bones in pieces before or ever they came into the bottom of the den, meaning they were already disinherited before the lions overcame them. That's what verse 24 just said. The king said, your ultimate judgment is the lions are going to eat you alive. But before that happens, I'm going to disinherit you. I'm going to take away your fruit yield, your children, and your wives, and I'm going to take away your positional status by breaking your bones. That's what. Without our bones, we're just a pile of ooze. Without bones, what are we? We're just ooze. I mean, think about that. Bones make us into a structure of a human being. Without bones, we're just a pile of ooze, like a glob. How you doing? I mean, come on. So bones give us structure or a position, a stature. He took away their fruit yield, children and wives, and their positional stature. Their status of the kingdom of the God or the kingdom of the heavens was taken from them. They were disinherited from their place, and from their fruit yield was taken, and then they were thrown into the lion's den. Before sin's judgment ever encompassed them, the lake of fire, the lion's den, they were already disinherited, and they knew it. Wives and children with them, and their bones were broken. And then the lions came and devoured them. They're like, well, that sucks. Yeah, you think? That's why I wouldn't go against God and his word. Stop being jealous and envious and all this stupid stuff, right? Yeah, I know, right? What about to each his own sin? Remember, to your point, Sister Vicky, the difference is they knew, like when God said the sins of the father are on his children's children, right? Generations after him, right? They knew this. In Ephesians, New Testament, because that's Old Testament, New Testament, Jesus says, honor your mother and father so your days may be long. Maybe. Doesn't mean they will be. But if you want a shot at it, you better obey your parents. You better honor them. Right? So, similitude to this is, they knew the law of the land. Well, if you go against the king in a way that, again, dishonors him, disrespects him, disobeys him, it's not just you. It's you and your entire family. And they knew that. That's at risk of life. The Romans were the first people that did that. The Romans were known for that. You go against the eagle of Rome, your whole family gone. They weren't the first ones who did that. The Romans did that. The Greeks did that. The Medes and Persians did that. The Babylonians did that. That's why, remember, under Nebuchadnezzar, he said, kill the wise men and burn their houses. Remember? So if you come against a king, it's not just you. They knew you're putting your wife and children at risk. All because your animus, your hatred, your jealousy, your resentment for one man. Is it really worth it? Which speaks to today. The reason why God put these practical things in place back in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, you see people doing this. Remember, when the one man believed that you should be saved, you and your household. Opposite's true too. You live righteous, you can have your household be impacted by your righteous living unto salvation. When the unsanctified, when they're both unbelievers and the wife is living righteously, she sanctifies her husband, it says, right? So there are scriptures that speak to both sides of this ledger. Unrighteous living can take others around you and unrighteous consequences. Righteous living can lead others to righteous consequences and relieve them and reprieve them from negative realities, right? Both are true. But the reality is that God's pointing out to us that, look at people today. People today want to live as they want to live. I'm dealing with it right now. I'm sure you are too in different ways. We have people in our lives that do what they want, when they want, how they want, but act like they should have no recourse on how they believe their relationship should be with all they know and love. You can't do that. You can't act how you want, when you want, whenever you want, and act like people owe you the relationship that you demand from them. It doesn't work that way. You just can't love them the way you choose to, even though you violate them and you victimize them and you exploit them and you disrespect them and you trash them and you just, abuse them. then you can just go, and act all nice. It doesn't work that way. You know I know that? Because you can't love God the way you think, can you? No. God says, love me the way I said. He said, love him the way that he said. John 14:21. Jesus said, he who has my commandments, so I have to have them, and keeps them, obeys me, is he that loves me. So wait a second, Jesus. You're telling me that the way to love you the way you say isn't from my heart, isn't from my thoughts, it's from me taking time to pray and get to know you through your word. And then from that, I got to now do it. And from those two things together, then I show I love you. He goes, that's right, son. Are you deaf? No, I got it. I got it. Thank you. My goodness gracious. I didn't know it was a process. I thought it was just a feeling. He's like, that's wrong. Not a feeling. It's a willful action. It's a volitional choice of a consistency of your heart and mind and spirit to say, I want to get to know God, and then from what I know about him, I want to do what I know. I don't care how much you know. Are you willing to learn more and more about him? And the more and more you learn about him, are you keeping true to obey what you know is true about him and what he told you to do? If you don't, then you don't love him. Don't say you do because you don't. Well, I feel in my heart a song comes on and I want to sing it. Doesn't mean nothing. Sorry, it means zero if you're not spending time getting to know him and doing what he says. All those emotional songs you might sing mean nothing to him. Nothing. Zero. You go, you're mean. No, I'm not. Read 1 Peter chapter 3. It's when it says that the man who has a problem with his wife goes to talk to God, and God's like, deaf ear, buddy. See here? Not listening to you. Fix it with your wife first. Say what? Don't believe me. Read 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 to 10. You tell me what's up. Got touched straight. God ain't playing with you. Well, I'm mean. She's being a witch and she's mean. I don't care. Make it right. Shut your pie hole and go to your wife and make it right. Well, she was wrong and I was right. I don't care. Make it right. If you want to talk to God, make it right. That's what he tells you. Straightforward. Well, she's wrong and I'm right and I don't care. Well, then you're a dummy. You're being a real dummy. God's not going to listen to you. Ever! If you're at odds with your wife and thinking that's okay, you can still talk to him. He's like, unless you're talking to me about that, that ain't going to happen. What you're not going to do, just obey what I told you to do and act like we're good. No, we're not good. Right? And that's why the children and wives followed them into the den. Because they knew they were coming against the king. That meant their whole family was at risk. They made that choice. The moment they got resentful, the moment they were looking for a narrative to validate, they knew. They knew. Right? Like folks today go, you can't separate children from their families. Okay, like the guy said, when a man is in the car and he has his two kids in the back seat and he is drunk out of his mind and he has hit a tree, do you take him to jail and his kids to jail too? No, take him to jail and his kids go to Child Protective Services or back to their mother or other family members, right? Did you just separate children from their family? Of course you did. Because that's the consequence that the dad did. He knew doggone well, getting in that car behind that wheel, drunk off his butt, that he was putting his kids at risk. And if he did do that, then he has every right to be separated from his children. They are now hurting and pained because now they experienced the situation and now their dad's now apart from them. Whose fault is that? Well, the kids shouldn't be collateral damage. I agree. It's not their fault. It's the consequence of their father. Just like right now. The children and wives are the consequence of their husband and father being so self-absorbed in their sinful, rebellious, resentful, hateful animus toward Daniel. For no other reason except for, I want the control. I want the shine from Cyrus. Then go get it yourself. By living the way you're supposed to live. Ask him about his God. Get to know his God, for crying out loud. Goodness gracious. That's so hard for you? Well, they're too prideful for that, you know? Anyway. The idea about killing the family of the offender removed from Jesus came. Yeah, so no, they still did that. When Jesus came about, remember, and the story in the book of Acts, after Jesus rose from the dead, and you're talking about the Apostle Paul, Jesus rose from the dead, AD 34, here's Paul, a good 10 plus years later, he's about 15 years later, he's in the prison, and his nephew comes and tells him that the Jews are going to jump the Roman guard, which they knew put them in. You can read Josephus' writing, which is post-Jesus. Josephus was post-Jesus. He knew that that was, they're putting their own lives at risk and their families. The Roman rule didn't change because Jesus died and rose from the dead. They didn't care about him. Not going to change the Roman rules just because he died and rose from the dead. They don't care. They could care less. They still got their rules. The rules are, go against the eagle of Rome, you and your wife and children die. What else you got? Did you know also in Roman culture that if you didn't pay your bills, they dug up your loved ones? They dug up the bones of your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your mom and dad. They dug them up and put them in front of your house, the bones, to disgrace them, because they wanted to show everybody in town that you were disgraced, you didn't pay your bills. There was no bankruptcy back then. That's the price you had to pay. That's your bankruptcy court back in the day. They had the bones of your loved ones right before your door, just to shame you. That didn't change post-Jesus resurrection. That was the same. Romans didn't care. They were all about shaming you and about bringing consequences upon you for not subjecting yourself to the eagle of Rome, that under no circumstances could you go against that. There was hell to pay. Didn't matter. Then you're right. How could you redeem yourself? You can't if you're. That's why it's important. That's why it's always important. Like today, you see stories about women who are under a battered man, under a bad man. That's why it always sucks when you see a man of a house living like off the aloof. He puts that women and children in harm's way. It's difficult. It happens in real life, doesn't it? Right? It does. Right? He goes off and does some drug deals. He goes off and does some philanderous things. He goes off. Who's he hurting? Himself? Alone? No. He's hurting her too, isn't he? And the kids too, isn't he? Yep. And the house is taken over by the FBI because he's doing cocaine or because he's doing whatever, drug deals, he's doing all kinds of illegal financial transactions. Does the wife get subjected to paying too? Yes. That's why the IRS has innocent spouse laws that say, hey, if your husband was defrauding us and you were not a part of it, then you can claim innocent spouse. If that law didn't exist, why does it exist? Because they know that sometimes that's true and sometimes it's not true. But either way, they know that there's a recourse happens to the wife because of what the husband does. I'm just telling you, our laws even today, we recognize that there's collateral damage for what the man does. So, going back to our scripture, as we end this study out, verse 25, 27. Then King Darius wrote on all the people. He wrote and inscribed all people and nations and languages that dwell on the earth. Peace be multiplied unto you. This is referring to this avenue of the culmination of the end of day 7 into day 8, which is why he says peace multiplied to you also in 2 Peter regarding how it's the peace multiplies from entering into inheriting Ariston to Dikenon. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before God of Daniel, for he is the living God and steadfast forever, and his kingdom which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be unto the end. He delivered and rescued, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who had delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered, or he advanced, he excelled, he was blessed in the reign of Darius, which is later, in 522 later on, and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. That's why he says Cyrus the Persian. That's why he says Darius. He wants you to know that under the Medo-Persian Empire, it began with a tumultuous beginning, but once this was come and gone, he wants you to know that he lived and prosperous during Cyrus all the way through Darius when he died. What typology for the betrothed bride, the faithful ones, even though they come after them in the Messianic reign, trying to take their crown from them, as Revelation 3:10 says about the church of Philadelphia, in a similar fashion. This is why he's saying that he wants you to know that this betrothed bride will prosper, not just during the day of the Lord, the Messianic reign, under the typology of Cyrus the Great, Darius the Mede, but also under Darius, the royal one himself, God the Father, under the day of God, when the bride then, of course, assumes the Dikenon, revealed bride, that station where she will always have a ongoing shine before the bridegroom Jesus. That's what he's talking about. So with that being said, that's how chapter 6 ends. And then chapter 7 and 8, as we look ahead a little bit, they're going to have flashbacks under Belshazzar. Then he goes into King Ahasuerus in chapter 9 and 10. He goes flashbacks under what he just talked about with Cyrus. So the next couple of chapters are flashback chapters. 7 and 8 are flashbacks under Belshazzar. 9 and 10 are flashbacks under 9, 10, 11 are flashbacks under the king Ahasuerus, which is, or excuse me, the King Cyrus, excuse me. And then you have all the way to the end of the book. So he doesn't really go past this, as you will see. So the next couple of chapters, 7 and 8, are a flashback to Belshazzar. Then after that, he's going back to what happened under Cyrus. Cyrus the Great, known as Darius the Mede, who's the son of Ahasuerus, meaning a son of a prince, son of a chief one. Okay? So with that being said, we're going to just continue on our next week, and I want to preemptively tell you ahead of time, I have knee surgery coming up on January 14th. And because of that, we will not be able to have service that following Sunday, because I cannot stand. I'm not supposed to stand. I'm supposed to lay up for a week. He said probably 2 to be safe. So we're going to have one Sunday we're going to miss upcoming. So next week we will meet on Sunday. We'll meet again Sunday, this coming Sunday. We'll meet again next week on January the 12th. We'll meet, and we'll have service on the 12th on chapter 7 of Daniel. But I just want to make sure you ahead of time know that we'll be having that 1 week off, so I have to have some time to heal from my knee to be able to stand again. Okay? So with that being said, just close in prayer, and also remind you that coming up is our time away in Gatlinburg, which will be from March 7th, a Friday, through the following Friday. So it'll be the March, the second week in March. We won't be able to have a service in the future, but I'll tell you about that more when we get closer. But to now, we'll see you next Sunday, and then the following, I'll remind you of the surgery we won't be able to have. So, all right, let's close and pray. So, Father, we thank you for this opportunity we have and all you give to us to help us to see, learn, and have insight into your word. Help us to learn more about your servant, as you call him, your prophet Daniel. Help us to be like him, 66 years of faithfulness and just duty to you in such a way where the courage and the tenacity and just the fervor for him to stand boldly, not in any fear or intimidation. He didn't waver. He all the more stood strong, being blameless and spotless, being zuka, being pure and innocent in your eyes, as you say. And help us to be likewise strong in our faith, that anybody who wants to look for a narrative in us can't find corruption, can't find some reasoning to want to accuse us. Let us examine ourselves as you remind us, and help us to be always faithful to you and remove the sin from our lives. Help us to be honorable to you, and knowing that there's a lot at stake, and holding true to what we know is more valuable than anything in this life. Help us not to be just seeking after goals of achievements in life, but the primary goal of achieving greater closeness with you, greater understanding with you, a greater spiritual walk with you, so that we're not the same year after year. We're different, that you change us, that you fracture us, you break us, you remold us, and fashion us into your image. Help us be the case for us in 2025 and years to come and the days to come until you call us home. We ask all this in Jesus, Yeshua's name we pray. Amen.